to a tutorial on how to practice and how to work on the Kansas All-State repertoire when it comes to the set with the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. I'm making this video in 2021, but Kansas is on a 3-year cycle and it just keeps repeating itself between Mozart, Weber's Second Concerto, and Weber's Concertino. So this year is the Mozart Concerto. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. If you'd like to hear me perform these excerpts, there is another video where I am performing all of the Mozart excerpts. All right, so we're starting in measure 57. You can see I have it all the brackets highlighted in pink so that we know where we're starting. My edition is a little bit different from the edition that they list on their website, but that's because I think this edition is easier to read and leaves things a little bit more up for interpretation. So any like articulation or expressive marking you see in a Mozart concerto score is editorial, which means that whoever published it made the markings, and actually all these things are up for interpretation. I know as a high schooler you might be like, oh god, I don't want to do that, so I'll just tell you how I like to play it. I really recommend that you are listening to this piece so you have a lot of stuff going on before you actually come in. I know this looks weird because these don't look like rest. There are definitely notes here. It's called ritornello, which in concerto form means that the orchestra is going to play the theme and some other material before you come in as the soloist. So this is all like orchestra cues, basically. They're also handy to have in your part in case you feel like you need to keep your instrument warm and you don't want to just be standing there for like 5 minutes waiting to come in. You can kind of noodle along with them. So, ritornello. Hooray, now we know. So we're coming in on G, and also I think it's weird to play this on clarinet in B flat. If you have a clarinet in A or access to clarinet in A, it's super impressive if you can play it in A, but you're also not required to do that. You can totally play this in B flat and it's fine. All right, so starting from D, 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 D. I think I like to play this at 120 beats per minute. Da, da, D, 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 D. Yep, about there. So I would go ahead and mark and always practice this with a metronome. Never practice it without a metronome. It's really, you're going to be fine if you show up to your audition and this is the first time you played it without a metronome. You'll be amazed. And also hopefully you can hear what's going on in the orchestra in the back of your mind as you're playing it. Da, dee, 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 dee. We could talk about these two measures until the cows come home. I've definitely had a lesson on only these two measures. Literally, someone talked to me about these two measures for an hour. I'm just going to tell you how I like to think of it. I like to do a little bit of crescendo there, and I like to do a little bit of staccato on those two notes. Da, 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 da. Light, though. Not pecky, not da, da, ta, 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 ta. It's very gentle. There you go. Rest. Dee-dum, be-dum, ba-dum. So you want a little bit of space here and here. Obviously, there are 8th note rest. That shouldn't be a problem, but don't feel like you gotta clip it. Don't clip it. Make sure these have a nice little ring to them as well. Dee-dum. Make sure that there's a difference between phrases that end in quarter notes and 8th notes. Make sure this has got its whole value. Da, da, right? Dee, 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 dee. I know this looks weird. So in Mozart's day, that's how we wrote appoggiaturas. So it's just a way of showing where the harmonic progression is going, but it's just gonna be straight 16th notes. C, C, B, C, B, D, C, B, A, G. So D, C, B, A are just gonna be straight 16th notes. Da, 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 dee, da, dee, 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 dee. Cool. Da, 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 dee, da, da, dum, dee, dee, dee. 2, 3, 4. Don't skip your rest. make sure you're counting all the beats, even your sustains. Counting your sustains and your rests in an audition is just as important as counting through all of your technical passages. If you don't count through all of them, it tells the judge that you don't actually know what's going on in the music and you didn't prepare. So make sure you're really counting all the time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, da, 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 da. So I know it can be hard to get off of a tie, and if the tie is giving you a hard time, try practicing it without the tie. 1, 2, 3, 4, da 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 da. That might help you out a little bit. And then add the tie in later as you get more comfortable with that rhythm, or pretend that you are removing the tie and you are articulating. A little chromatic moment. So I like to do this one, slur 2, tongue 2. Da 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 da. You want to give this a big crescendo and make sure that this B is not popping out. I would think of this F as louder than this B. Da 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 da. Do a big crescendo all the way down there too. That'll help with your articulation, and it'll help with your expression if you're really crescendoing to the bottom. And it'll help get this B out without any kind of crazy blasting coming out. Now we have staccatos under slurs, which just means legato articulation. Nothing crazy, no need to go da 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 da, but you also don't want to slur. You just want to give it a nice da 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 da. And do a little decrescendo as you're going through those eighth notes. And then this, you want to do a big crescendo. I like to do, again, slur 2, tongue 2, and then slur this whole group up from A to C, and then I do this, there's a dotted slur in my part, I do this slur, I actually do it. Yay! And with this drill, it starts on an E. You go E to D, because that is a very classical period thing, or Enlightenment period thing, which is when Mozart lived. A lot of things are like that in this piece. So definitely approach this trill from the E to the D, and then these grace notes just kind of take you out of it. If you're having a hard time landing it, let yourself land on the D, and then give yourself a grace note D, da-da-dum, D, da-da-dum. Now let's move on to the next excerpt, which is at the end of the exposition of this first movement. So you can see I've highlighted in pink again the next excerpt from measure 134 to 154. It's the end of the exposition of Mozart's Clarinet Concerto. So we have this fun stuff. This is called Alberti bass. And it's something that clarinets do a lot. It's where you have these, like, this kind of drum going, D, 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 and bum, 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 beam, 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 beam. And you just have this alternating line that makes it sound like two different voices are playing at the same time. Pretty cool. And this is a pretty idiomatic version of Alberti bass. So we're just going G, D, B, D, A, D, C, D, etc., etc., and it's not so bad. And it's a pattern. We do it for 3 measures. 1, 2, 3 for a grand total of, never mind, 3 times, 3 measures worth. And then it changes here. Instead of going G, D, B, D, A, instead of going to A, we're going to go to F sharp. G, D, B, D, F sharp, D, A, G, G, D, B, D, F sharp, D, A, D, G. So we're about to resolve and going into something new, so make sure that you're not getting tripped up here and that this one is different. Otherwise, it's the same as the previous 3. And this is where this is a spot where it might be a little bit different depending on which edition you're using. I like this one where it just kind of gradually takes you up. This piece was originally written for basset clarinet, which had an extension, low range extension to a C, to like a written low C. And so typically this would actually go down the octave, and it would go way down low. But since modern clarinets are not built with that extension, we have the octave displacement here and here, which is fine. So depending on what edition you have, it might be different notes. The point is that this will be in G major, and this will be in C major. So as long as it's a G major chord and a C major chord going into, once again, a G major chord, you're gonna be fine, regardless of what iteration the chords are in. Then we have a nice G major scale. I do this all slurred too. Oh yeah, duh. So we do all these slurred. I think I would slur the whole thing. I would slur from here to here, basically, and just do the whole thing on one breath. And that's another thing. You definitely have to do this whole thing on one breath. You have to go from here to here and take a big breath. Good. And then do your scale. I do slur 2, tongue 2. Or with 8, no, 8, tongue, tongue, slur 2, 8, 16, 16, tongue, tongue, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean. That's wrong. It's not the way I want to do it. Slur 2, tongue 2, and then do all this slurred. That's how I like to do it. And this, I like to slur the groups. And these are hard. These arpeggios get really complicated. So if I'm having a really good day, I will slur 2, tongue 2. But again, there's no articulation written. And if I'm not feeling particularly great about my articulation on any given day when I have to play this, I'll just do the whole thing slurred. I find that I have a little bit more success. Not the whole thing. I will slur to the C, and then I will tongue the high E, just because when we articulate high notes, they tend to come out a little bit better. And then this one, here's an example of an arpeggiation or a broken chord. And you might also see this just going straight up. Oop. Which is actually how I would typically play it. Again, slur 2, tongue 2, or slur the whole thing, depending on how you're feeling. I would continue this also. Up high, I know that seems high. It's just an E and a G. This is a C sharp here. This is a little like F sharp half diminished to an F sharp diminished chord. And then this is a C sharp minor chord up to high G. What? All right, there we go. So that's how I would normally play it, is to continue the arpeggiation upwards instead of to break the chord. But you do have this option to break the chord if you are really scared of making those high notes come out. But if you get the high notes to come out, you will come out ahead of people who arpeggiate the chord in an audition scenario. All right, and then we have this funny little thirds pattern. Dee, doo, 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 and I would slur the whole thing. Some people articulated it, but I just slur it. Thirds are hard enough. And also, these aren't just straight thirds. We're in G major, so it's just a G major third pattern, so we just have F sharps. It's our only accidental going up, but then this is a nice big fourth instead of a third, so make sure you're catching that in the last beat of measure 148. You're going D to G instead of D to F sharp. D to G, you're just skipping up a little bit, and it happens again in measure 149 in the third beat. I have them circled here. I like to circle them because it'll draw my eye towards it and make sure I don't mess it up. So you might need to circle it in your part too. So now the hard stuff is all over in my mind. We're just kind of cruising from here, from B to the end, from this B to the end. So up here we don't really need our pinky because that's too hard. So I'm gonna write the letter P and draw a slash through it for no pinky. D, C sharp, D, because trying to coordinate the pinky is a little bit too much work between the pinky and the middle finger, because you don't want to play with the pinky on the C sharp, but it's typically something you really want to do on the D, and then add your pinky here. So plus pinky for that D. And then I really like the banana key fingering for A sharp instead of the side. The side key is a lot to coordinate, but just going with the middle finger and then that banana key. And I do right hand, C sharp, and then this is chromatic, all the way to the end. And this is another one of those where you're going to start from the note above for the trill. So you're going to go B to A, yum, da-dee-dum. And again, you can, if you're having a hard time coming out of it, settle on the A first and then do your grace notes out. Do-do-dum, da, da-dee-dum. Just make it as graceful as you possibly can, basically coming out of that. And you might be wondering why there are all these little lines here. I think those are supposed to be staccato marks in this edition, but I think of them as like these B's is just kind of light. So I'm putting check marks just to symbolize a little bit of space between them. And you'll want to make sure that there's a big difference between these triplets and these 16th notes. And this is kind of like a written accelerando, right? It's just a chromatic scale the whole time, but Mozart really wanted to get from D to D. That being said, you don't want to play it as an accelerando. You definitely want it to be very metered. Da 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 dum. So be careful of that. All right, we've gotten through the second excerpt of the first movement, and now we have a new excerpt this year in the slow movement. Ignore this for last year's video. So the slow movement is adagio. It's very slow. I actually think of this as eighth note equals 100. I really like to keep it slow. It's not one of those kinds of adagios where you want to make sure the motion is going forward. You definitely want this to feel very set. Almost stagnant, but not quite. So we don't have to start until measure 33. It says 34 on the website, but I think there's a discrepancy of measure numbers in my edition versus what they are doing, because my measure 34 is here, and that's weird. So I assume they want to start here where it says solo at the beginning of something, at the beginning of like a whole thematic section, in fact. So we're just gonna go for it. So they're like not very many articulations here, so we're going to go da da da. You can articulate all these, but I like to slur up to the C. Da, dee, dee. That's actually how I like to articulate this section. And it says piano, but you want to be whatever dynamic is necessary for you to get a good sound here. If that means mezzo forte, that's fine. The most important part is that you're getting a good sound quality for this phrase. Dee, 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 do, 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 do. I know this looks like a lot of notes. It's just a G7 chord, and you can slur the whole thing And use your right hand pinky for that B. And I actually do these pretty legato. I think of them as tenuto. Ya, da, da, da. And do a big crescendo here. And do a decrescendo to that E. I think this F is probably the loudest note in this little phraselet. And you're immediately starting to decrescendo on the A up here. And make sure you are, again, counting every little beat like we've talked about in other excerpts. Even the rests, even the sustains, even when it's easy, even when it's hard, all the time, counting. So these dashes represent eighth notes. So the big dashes are quarter notes and the little dashes are the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Cool. It's kind of like the bouncing ball of a sing-along or something. All right, 37. Okay. So don't forget that this dotted quarter note is going to get 3 clicks. And now I know you're looking at this thinking, what the heck is that? We're going to slur all of that. And do legato articulation there. So this is how you would count this. They're like little dum digga da da dum. I know that just seems really crazy. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, just want to make sure there are 4 16th notes worth of time in this. 16, and then it's like a triplet, 30-second note, plus 2 more 16th notes. That's for each group. So, dum digga da dum. Dum digga da dum, dum digga da 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 da. Dum digga da da dum, dum digga da da dum digga da da dee 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 dum. So make sure that you remember that. That's how that ornament goes. Dum digga da da dum digga da da dee dee dee. Cool. Wow. This is D, or G, you want it to be probably fortissimo, very loud, so that you can be kind of gentler. Not too gentle, but maybe a mezzo forte on this D, bum, da, to give it a very delicate effect. You don't need to play like piano or something, and that's kind of risky, right? We want that D to come out. We don't want to squeak or anything. We don't want to be scared of that interval. It can actually be quite a comfortable interval as long as you're putting enough air behind it and compensating with your dynamics. Dum, da, dee, 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 dee. So, and we have like a little chromatic moment and a scale. And don't go too fast on 16th notes, right? I know we just had a bunch of stuff up here. Dum. So these are 30-second notes, so they'll be a little bit quick. You can also think of this in 16th notes. This is 1/16 notes worth of time, these two 30-second notes. Dum, digga dum, 1, 2, 3, and a 4. 1, 2, 3, da-da-dum. And that'll make sure you got all the time right. And now we've got some fun rhythms here too. It's not so bad though. G, 1, 2, 1 and 2 and a 1, 1, 2, 1 and 2 and a. It doesn't matter. I'm just gonna let the syllables go. So I'm gonna mark in all the eighth notes. Do do da 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 dee dee dee. Do do da 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 da. This is kind of a little mysterious moment, because we're down low and we've had all these like lovely soaring high register melodies, and now we're kind of drifting into the low range. In fact, this thing at 47, like I told you about how this was originally written for basset clarinet, this would be an octave lower on the basset clarinet. It would be so low and so cool. Alas, we don't have that range, so we're playing it up an octave on soprano clarinet. Same here. Do do da dee 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 do 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 do. But we don't have those notes, so we did a little octave displacement. So don't worry about this sextuplet. We're just gonna think of them as triplets. When you break it up into little chunks, it's not so bad. It's not so hard anymore. Do do do. Do, do. So then that's how it adds up. Da 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 dee. Do da dee da dee da dee da 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 da. Yeah, octave displacement again. Do da 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 ya da 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 dee 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 dee. So group of 4, group of 4, group of 3, group of 3 for each eighth note. Do da 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 da. And that should help you kind of organize your thoughts a little bit. Yeah. Take a big breath here so you can make this nice G come out, and same thing. Bum, dee. You definitely want to take a nice big breath here so you don't have to breathe here. No, don't breathe there. This is just a chromatic scale, but you want to make sure that you're landing on the beats at the right spots. Da 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 da. Dee da 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 da. Dee da 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 da. So definitely that when you hit the first quarter note, it's a G. When you hit the second quarter note, it's a C sharp. And when you hit the third quarter note, it's a G again. Da 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 da. And a really long trill. I know that this trill feels like it goes on forever. Make sure you're doing your best to count. I know that counting trills is really, really hard. Just make sure you're practicing it with your metronome. And when you're actually playing it without your metronome, just feel like really pounding that beat home, either with your foot or in your mind. And this is another trill that starts from above and goes down. E to D. Yeah. D. Da da dum. And again, getting out of it, rest a little bit on that D before going C, D, C. And then that's it. You've made it through all your excerpts for Kansas All-State Band auditions for whatever, this year. Good luck. Make sure that if you enjoyed this video, you hit subscribe, and stay tuned for more awesome clarinet tutorials and videos and fun stuff. And I'll see you next time.